Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm joined by co-owner of HHA, Chris Hamm. Chris, it's a great pleasure to finally have you back on. It's been a long time, like we just said.
It has, man. I want to say it was. I think it was pre-COVID, wasn't it?
Oh
Probably.
yeah,
Probably January of 2020, maybe.
yeah. It was like I think right before everything kind of went crazy.
Wow. Yeah. It seems like that was yesterday, and it was.
I know.
We're coming up on 4 years already.
I know, it's nuts. Well, here's a we're just chatting, and it just because it's live, it's in your brain. It's fresh. It just happened Sunday night. You got some meat in the freezer. How did that all play out for you?
Yeah, I won't make this too long of a story, but I guess I'll just kind of tee up why it was such a special hunt. I mean, I had so last year I killed my best buck ever to date. It ended up being a 169-inch deer that I called Houdini. I had him on my farm for 3 years. Just an awesome story behind that one. But I had two pretty good deer on my farm late summer, early fall. And I don't know, I'm calling it Houdini hangover. And there's a great message in this because I mean, by no means did I get a big head thinking, well, I'm just a big buck killer now. But I mean, these deer were good deer. They were in probably 130s, 140s, good deer that I should have gone out and killed. And for whatever reason, I just didn't have the fire early in the season to get out and hunt. Long story short, one of those deer completely disappeared. The second one, my cousin ended up killing opening night of rifle season. And then I actually had a pretty nice buck at my house here. I've got 160 acres where I do most of my hunting, but then my wife and I live on 17 acres just outside of town. We've got a lot of deer here, and she had found the sheds off of a buck. It was March of 2022. I was in town grocery shopping one night, and she sends me a text. She's like, "Hey, I think there's a deer antler in the yard." And a minute later, she's like, "I think there's another one." And I'm like, "Are you kidding? I've never found a matching set of sheds in my life of all my years of hunting." She finds them in her sweatpants in our living room. And so we affectionately named that deer the Holly Buck, and he showed back up on my cameras here. So I hunted him all fall and just spent a lot of time in the woods bow hunting, trying to go after my target buck. Didn't happen. Picked up the gun. My cousin ends up killing my other target buck. So I was a little discouraged, a little down in the dumps. It's like, man, I've spent a lot of time in the woods and I don't have anything to show for it as far as putting anything on the tailgate or in the meat in the freezer. But Sunday night was the last night of we have a 4-day doe hunt here that wraps up kind of all of our rifle seasons. And it's been a slow year for seeing deer. We did have a poacher out by our land, unfortunately, that killed a young buck that was a little disappointing. So I don't know how much damage this poacher has done, but long story short, just wasn't seeing the volume of deer that I normally did. So I was a little reluctant to shoot a doe out at my place. Well, then Sunday night, 10 minutes before closing, I had 10 deer pile into my field and made a pretty nice shot on a doe at 160 yards. And she ended up piling up, within about 60, 70 yards. And the neighbor came and helped me get her out on the UTV. And so long story, but it's been a long grinding season. But just a lot of lessons. And I mean, being a man of faith, it's like, what is God trying to teach me in this season? And I mean,
Right.
The one word that comes up to me is opportunity. There was so many opportunities. I mean, had I had a little more pep in my step early in the season and said, yeah, that 140-inch deer is a pretty nice deer, I should probably go and try and kill him. I mean, that deer daylighted 3 times in front of my blind in the first week of the season. I could have got an arrow in him early in the season, but I chose not to. And then, hunting the holly buck behind my house, I passed up dozens of does. Every night I had does coming in, but I just didn't want to stink things up and risk blowing him out of there. So again, more opportunities that I didn't take advantage of. So it's not like I didn't have opportunities. It's just that I didn't seize those. So that's there's a lot more to be said about that comment than just hunting.
Right. That's the one beauty about these conversations that I'm very fortunate and lucky to have with individuals like yourself, Chris, is where I get a chance to hear your story, right? Like I get a chance to hear, you're reflecting on your season. And that was one word that I wrote down that I would love to have we could get into during this conversation is reflecting and kind of moving forward, basically. But with that, it's so fascinating to hear everybody's stories as just how the path that they take, right? Like, obviously, hunting is just one little blip of what we do in our everyday lives. And that is just one thing that we love and cherish and really put a lot of effort into. But when it comes to just hearing those stories of how, like you said, the opportunities, like that's your word that comes to mind. Like mine, I could kind of relate to you, right? Like my word if I reflect on my season was opportunities. I seized those opportunities because that's for me. I bounced around a little bit. I hunted particular spots at particular times, and I seized those opportunities where, that's the beauty of where you hunt is, you're hunting these specific parcels. And, I know from last time we've had the conversation on the podcast and just obviously our usually monthly that a conversation that we have, I know that, for anybody listening, Chris doesn't really travel outside of Wisconsin, right? Like you like to hunt your properties. So you have your story of what you want to take and what gets you forward. And it's just so fascinating. Again, I love hearing how everybody's story has a path and what you want to get out of it, basically.
Yeah, and it was cool because we just got, I mean, it's 23 degrees here today. We got a couple inches of fresh snow on Sunday morning, and it's like, man, I've probably hunted, I've spent 75, maybe 100 hours in the stand already this fall. And again, nothing to show for it as far as a deer on the ground or anything on the wall, but so many lessons. And Sunday, I'm walking out to my blind, that fresh snow is there. I'm thinking, okay, there's a social media post here. So God's telling me something. And so I'm taking pictures on my way in of, these beautiful trails that I have through my property with the fresh snow on them. And it's like, everything is just fresh and it's new and it's clean. And it was almost like God was telling me, okay, your season starts today.
Yeah.
Granted, you've been hunting for almost 3 months, but your season starts today. And I was very optimistic that I was going to have an opportunity that night, and he provided. And then 24 hours later, I'm literally, cutting that deer up in my garage. I can look out my garage window and see my food plot, 80 yards behind my house. My wife is inside. She had just gotten done working from home. She's decorating for Christmas, and I'm on the phone with a good friend, and my phone is blowing up. And I look at my text. She's like, "Hey, I think my buck is in the backyard." Sure enough, I pull up my Reveal Tacticams, and there he is, 20 yards in front of my blind. It's like, doggone it. I hope he shows up tomorrow night. But I've got a whole new spring in my step that I didn't have early in the season now, because I've got some meat in the freezer, and now I've got almost 4 weeks to hopefully get an arrow in this target buck. And what a cool story that's going to be if it transpires.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I just love how, like you said, you're out grocery shopping, getting things done, and she sends you those messages as she's in the house. And I think I see some antlers. I just think that is so funny, just because, like you, I've never had that opportunity to really find a match set. I've been around where I found an antler, and then either someone found the other side to it, but not necessarily myself finding a match set. So I just always think that's such a fun story, and the fact that, again, you're still hunting him, like that's the really cool thing.
It's just this deer, and I think that's really why I wanted to, maybe that was one of the reasons I didn't go out to my farm. As nice as those deer were, it's like, yeah, but they'll be really nice if they're still around next year. But I really wanted to get this deer, just because her and I have a story with it. And she doesn't hunt, but she gets so excited when she, it's fun watching her in the house, running around all the different rooms and looking out and grabbing my Vortex binos and watching the deer. And like I say, we've seen that deer 5 or 6 times out of our house, but I just can't lay eyes on him in my redneck blind. But hopefully that'll happen here one of these nights before the end of the season.
I like that. So leading up to this season, Chris, did you do anything for new towards your property or try anything different this year?
I did. So I've got 160 acres, and I'm a big proponent of box blinds. I mean, they don't give those things away, but being in the industry, I'm able to get some connections through my friends at Redneck, and really enjoy hunting those. But one thing that I did when I first put in my first 2 rednecks, I've got a 5-acre field that I do a lot of my rifle hunting on. It's my main food source, and I had those both on the south side of the field. Well, the bad thing was the western blind, I couldn't quite cover the whole field during rifle season, so I decided to move that one in the off season. So we moved it in July, so it now sits on the west end, and I'm basically shooting into my sanctuary. The only downside is that it kind of kind of stretches my shots a little bit. The field's about 125 yards wide, but it's about 250 long. And so that's where I got that doe on Sunday night, and she ended up, I think I hit her with a rangefinder. She was about 160 yards, but now I'm able to cover that whole field, and I'm glad that I moved that blind, because even though I've had some success out of that in its previous location, I definitely can cover the field better now. So that was probably the major enhancement that I make, was just moving that blind. And then I've got a really good setup on my north 80. I had a blind there last year, but just with the way that I planted my crops this year, I've got basically a row of corn that kind of cuts the blind off from the road, because it's fairly close to a county road. But it's a great pinch point that will be I think a spot that's going to produce for years, because I've got right now I've got a strip of soybeans that's probably 40 yards wide that runs between the corn and the woods line. And then there was a scrape line on the east end of that field, and that's where that target buck was visiting early during the season, and basically just funnels between there and the bedding. So I've got a really, really sweet setup for early season bow that I can guarantee next year, if I have a shooter on camera, I'll be out there in September when the season starts, and not be singing the blues in December with an unpunched tag.
I like that, Chris. So I want to know, because of kind of your property layout, like exactly what you just said, and some new things, and moving the blinds and along those lines. Like, I always struggled with, when I go back at home at Northeast Pennsylvania to hunt, my dad and I, we always say there's really one entry and exit, like, to where we go. And so obviously the troubling part, when you look at this 2-track road, I'll call it, along that, the deer love to walk it or bed it paralleling this road. So you hopefully get in nice and quiet or super early and could beat them to a bedding spot, because if you do, you're watching them either come up or down depending on how they're moving. But if not, like, my dad messaged me the other day, he goes, "Oh, I already bumped." He goes, "I heard some running as I was walking in the dark to his stand location where he was going." So how important is those locations? Obviously, number one, on your property, but number two, the access to those.
It's I am just super blessed the way that this property all transpired and just came to be, because I mean, it's my dad, he passed 4 years ago, but there's a picture of his grandfather hanging in my dad's garage from the late 1800s. Back then, the Hamms owned, like a lot of, I think, families around this country, owned hundreds, if not thousands, of acres. And so he was able to acquire the 80 acres that was part of the original homestead from his uncle 25 years ago. And then my wife and I bought the adjacent 80 that butts up to it. Well, we've got a county highway on the west side, and then there's a county road on the north side and a dead end dirt road on the south. So I basically have access from 3 sides. And the majority of all of my ag, I rent some of it out to a local farmer that farms some of it, but the ag is all on the west. So I'm just hunting the perimeters, and I have really minimal penetration on the woods from all 3 sides. I basically access from the north and the south. The east I don't access at all, because that's kind of my sanctuary, and it butts up against the neighbors. So that's where the bulk of the bedding area is. So it is really, really easy in and out. And I can't remember the last time I bumped a deer, just because they're all bedded either to the east side or more in the core of the property. So I really don't disturb any of the animals going in and out. And I think that's why my success has been so great over the last handful of years.
That's awesome. I like to hear that, just because I hunted Ohio this past November, and it kind of very similar as far as, like, you have fields and strips of timber along those lines. And that's so new to me. So it was just like trying to balance of, like, okay, where do I go in that? How do I not bump deer? Where are deer at? So it was a challenge, and I'm excited, hopefully next year, to be able to go back and maybe learn from my mistakes. And, that's where I also, like, want to kind of transition to with this discussion, Chris, is like reflecting and moving forward. And that is in life, that is in hunting. I just, from our conversations that we've had and things that where I've talked to you, or you've helped me personally, where where do you see that importance of, and why do you think maybe it is important for people to reflect and move forward with their reflections basically? You could even either use an example, you can just just reflecting in general, why that is critical in our everyday lives.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever you're trying to do, if you're trying to run a business, if you're running a nonprofit, if you're just trying to be a good human being, a good husband, a good father, whatever that is, there's really no neutral
Yeah.
action. You're either going forward or you're going backward. You can't just tread water. That's not an option. So, 2023 has been a really a learning year for me in a lot of ways, and I've just got like I said, a new spring in my step as far as the hunting season goes. So I still have another month. God still has a month of my hunting story to write this year, and I'm still in the middle of that reflection. So maybe if we'd had this conversation 60 days down the road, I would have been able to answer it better. But I just know already, you know, like I said, that word opportunity is coming up to me. And yes, obviously, if I would have gone out hunting earlier in the season, maybe I would have had a crack at that buck. But if that's the case, then I wouldn't have, my buck tag would be punched right now, and I'd just be able to watch, the holly buck out the window. So instead, maybe that's the plan that God had all along, was for me to shoot that deer here sometime before the end of the season. So we can reflect, we can do all of these things, but at the end of the day, ultimately, we're not the ones in control. We answer to Him if we're following Christ, and that's just it's humbling, because we think, okay, I got this figured out. I'm going to do this and this and this. Well, maybe is that His plan?
Right. Right. I like, and I love what you just said too, bro. Like previously with this is, you're either moving backwards or moving forwards, like that treading water, like staying in that neutral position is not really anything good. And I've noticed even with in anything, when I reflect on certain things, when I look back at, okay, when did I make the most strides? My most strides are either happening when I was moving backwards and I know I hit something and I need to move forward, or when I was moving forward and you continuously make those strides, right? When I feel like things aren't in a good spot, is in that neutral zone, like that gray area. Like I just always feel like you said, you're stuck and you do need something. And I love hearing like how you said you got that pep in your step now, that extra thing. And like you said, God has that other month to write out this plan, but you're able to reflect on certain things of the season already to allow you to kind of move forward. And like you said, it happens even in our everyday lives as fathers, husbands, speaking of men here, and brothers, whatever. And it allows you to kind of hit that reset button and hopefully let that path play out for you. And I think that's critical.
Yeah, and it was just, it was emotional Sunday night. I mean, I hunt by myself. My brother lives in town, but he hunts, probably a half hour away from where I do. So we text each other frequently, and I've got neighbors, and my cousins are out there. And but that night I was out there by myself, and for whatever reason, I shot that deer at 160 yards, and there was zero blood. I just talked to another guy that shot a deer with his bow. Friend of mine Sunday night, same thing. It fell over within sight, but it just didn't bleed. I mean, those critters are strange. Sometimes that happens. And thankful for the fresh snow. There was 10 deer in the field, but I knew basically where she ran into my sanctuary, and it was like God just led me right to that deer. I mean, I would have found her eventually, but it's like, we do have a coyote problem. I didn't really want to have to come back the next morning and deal with half of a deer carcass. And so I was starting to get a little angst up as I'm walking through the rows of my beans following these tracks. And then I just got to the edge of the woods, and I look into my sanctuary. I'm like, I think that's a deer. And I shine my light over there, and sure enough, the light hit her eyes. And I got a little emotional in the moment, because it's like, man, it's so rewarding. And I think we have to pay homage to these animals, because it's not just a kill. It's not a social media post. There's something very spiritual to me, and we have to give thanks in those moments. And I stood over that animal for about a minute, and was just praising God and just thankful for the opportunity. And it really, like I said, it kind of recharged my battery. And it's like, man, this is why I do this. It wasn't a 170-inch buck. It was a 125-pound doe that's going to make some awesome awesome venison tacos for me this week, and feed my family for the next year or so.
I'd love to hear that. And you really brought something as soon as you were saying, like, you're reflecting and just being in that moment. It really hit me visualizing, like, immediately. I went right to the day that I killed my buck and doe within. So I killed 5 in a 23-day span in Pennsylvania. And the day that I killed my buck, I killed a doe 10 minutes prior. And I said this already on a podcast episode where I gave, it must have been an hour, at least it felt like an hour, but maybe it was more of a 30-minute to 45 minutes of just solitude, of just being in one with my surroundings. In a sense, like, I could hear the wind whistling. I could hear, like, it almost felt like each leaf trickling by, but seeing the orange, the red, the yellow amongst the trees, this way the sun was coming through, the god rays, I like to call them. And just, I don't know, Chris, it was just something where I just loved that morning and just took it all in and was very thankful and gave my thanks. And like you said, you give that respect to the animal. But then knowing that my dad was up there and knowing that, there's not going to be here forever, neither one of us, right? And just knowing that I could have then that moment with him. And it was so bittersweet because as we were taking care of my 2 deer and we're bringing them up to the truck, he goes, "Oh man," he goes, "I'm so thrilled for you." He goes, "But now, like, my rest of the season, I'm going to be coming up here by myself." You know what I mean? It just hit me hard because I was like, dang, that's the bittersweet moment of doing that early. And it was kind of like what you were saying too earlier. Like, I was very thankful within that moment, but it was also for me, I was like, I was fulfilled. I knew I had my Ohio trip coming up and I was super excited about it, but I was excited because I was going with a friend and I wanted to just make a memory, and whatever success was going to come out of it would have just been icing on the cake. And I wasn't like, I need to do this. Like you were saying, it's not about a social media post. It's not about that. It was something more. And that's where, again, reflecting on the past couple years, and just learning and growing as an individual and with my faith and all along those lines, I think that has helped, you know, kind of realign things, to make things what's really important, basically.
Yeah, and probably one of the coolest things that happened that night. So my late father, he passed away in 2019, but he started HHA, is the one that got me into archery. And back in, I want to say it was '96, he had a heart attack, um, and that changed the trajectory of his life. And he wasn't able to shoot a vertical bow after that, so he was shooting a crossbow, for probably the last 5 or 6 years that he hunted. Well, that deer happened to expire literally within about 20 yards of the last place that my dad ever
Wow.
hunted with his crossbow. And it wasn't like I was lost and disoriented. I knew that spot was there, but it wasn't top of mind when I went to trail that deer. And all of a sudden I looked at her and I'm like, hang on a second. I looked at my headlamp and I could literally see the tree that he had last hunted in, probably back in 2005, 2006. So it added even more of a special
Yeah.
meaning to that hunt. It's like he was there in that moment. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, that is really cool, Chris. So here's a question, and I personally would love to hear your answer to. Obviously, with having HHA for the last 40 years, within you, that's amazing. You're wearing a HHA USA sweatshirt, which is obviously the uniting service members within archery. And I do want to talk about that because there's some really cool things going to be happening this year with that, and have been happening. And I think it's really important to share those. But, take all those things, either one of those entities, basically HHA, HHA USA, some really cool projects you've been a part of. What have been some of you, like, what is some that you just bring a smile to your eye, or smile to your face, a twinkle in your eye? Just what brings that joy that you're so thankful to be a part of?
I mean, obviously we've been really, really blessed on the HHA Sports side of things, and have been one of the staples in our industry for decades, and that's very humbling to be in that conversation. And so we've done some great things there, but I think the HHA USA stuff is really kind of first and foremost what I am most proud of, and the work that God is doing through that. I mean, that's something that came into being 4 or 5 years ago, and yeah, just seeing the life change and the life-saving things that are happening through that, and just the network that it's building. I mean, there's people literally from all over the country that have become a part of HHA USA Nation, and we're just, I feel like this train just continues to gain momentum, and that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of in all my time in the archery space, is that a sport that I maybe at some point even took for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm seeing it in a whole new light, and how it is bringing life change and really changing people for the good through that work.
That's insane of what you've been already in such a short amount of time been able to accomplish with that. And like you said, it's not necessarily doing events, doing those things, like those are part of it, but like you said, it's the changing the lives thing that I find just mind blowing in a positive way, right? Like that's just because I know for someone that I was not military, I struggled with certain things as far as like mental health concerns go, like, kind of, I would probably even like reflect on it as I could even say my whole life. Like I've said on the podcast before, just growing up the way I grew up, I was an angry kid, and I hid it. Do you know what I mean? I hid that from my peers, from my family members, from a lot of things. And then I think I can only imagine what certain individuals go through when they come home from war or something along those lines. And doing something through archery, I think, is incredible, because I know for a fact what archery has done for me. I always, just even the other day, I was coming home with my wife, and I was like, I used to play golf a lot, and I just enjoyed it just because I was in that world as far as the job was concerned. I worked at country clubs a lot, and I said to my wife driving home, I was like, I would like to play golf a little bit more often. And my best friend, Jim DiAgostino, hunter, archery, he's through and through a hunter as well. But we both played baseball growing up, and we both, for enjoyment, we're not very good at golf, but we got together one time this summer to play. So long story short, I said to my wife, I would like to play golf maybe a little bit this summer. And she goes, oh, you should. There's a plethora of individuals that would go with you. And I started laughing then, because she goes, what? I said, you're not wrong. I said, but who are we kidding? I think I've said this the last 3 years, and what do I end up doing? I end up just shooting my bow, and it's just because it's so therapeutic to me. And there's just, Total Archery Challenge has it right when they say life's better with a bow in hand. They're not wrong to me, right? And I just think continue to doing things with the HHA USA, and I'm hopeful that there's things that hopefully I could be a part of, and to do that. And the cool thing is, you don't have to, I know, and this is where I want you to maybe elaborate too on certain things, Chris. You don't have to attend one of these events to necessarily help, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and I mean, my original plan going into 2024 was to start expanding and going to other states, but I just feel like we really have a lot of work left to do here in Wisconsin. So we're, spoiler alert for your listeners and mine, unfortunately, we're not going to be doing any out of state events anytime soon. But Wisconsin's a great place to visit. I mean, we have seven shoots on the schedule for 2024. Got some great clubs, and I mean, we do have people literally traveling from coast to coast. I mean, we've had people come from California, Florida, Texas, Washington, all over the place. So, but for people that can't come and physically see one of the shoots, and I would really, really welcome people to come out here, because it's one thing to talk about it on a podcast, but until you actually experience it, it's an archery shoot like no other. I mean, it's we even joke, it's like, if you want to pick up a scorecard at registration, you can. If you don't, that's not a problem either. Bring the family, bring your kids, raise some money, have some fun, shoot your bows for a great cause for our veterans and our first responders. And it's a community. We're building a family in a support system around the sport of archery, and I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's the aspect where I think, depending on what kind of priorities that you have and that you want to maybe do, like I'm at the point in time of my life, especially in this archery journey that I'm taking. I would love to, if I'm where I'm at, and I can only speak for myself, if I could travel to some sort of out of state event, like for an archery 3D shoot, I want to partake in something like what you just said. And that's just me personally, right? Like we were very fortunate where Total Archery Challenge comes here to Pennsylvania. I've shot that a couple times. I've worked a couple different ones out in Colorado and in Montana with Tethered. So that was like a cool experience of working those. But now also like, okay, where would I like to go to maybe partake in one? And like you just said, that experience where not only could you be around and open your eyes to maybe something new, but also be a part of something like that, I just think would be really cool to help raise money for individuals. And that's something bigger than just going to shoot a cool shoot, basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I just did, my podcast this Friday is going to be the our schedule drop for 2024 with my editor, and he and his wife and his son have been up to a shoot the last 2 years, and his wife Jen was very excited to hear this podcast. She's like, okay, we're gonna have to listen to this and figure out where we're going as a family. What HHA USA shoot are we coming to? So I mean, it's part of their family vacation where they're going to bring their bows, but then they're going to do other things too. So I mean, we've got Wisconsin Dells up here. We've got Green Bay. If there's football fans, people can go up and take a tour of Lambeau Field this summer. We've got the Milwaukee Brewers. So if you've got baseball fans that are archery guys too, I mean, there's so much other stuff to do in the state of Wisconsin. Come and make a family vacation out of it and bring your bows and come out and support one of our events. So it's kind of you can kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah. So here's what I need your help for now here, Chris, is to get our mutual friend, Shea Butler. We have to time it and pick the same one where he and I could come to that same shoot this year. We must have to start a text thread or something along those lines where you could challenge both of us to say, okay, you two need to come to the same one and have a good time together.
I will see what I can do. I know he's like you and I. I mean, there's no grass growing under that guy's feet. He's got a growing business, and he's a ball coach for his kids too.
Yes,
so
right.
We're gonna have to get to him maybe I don't know if there is an off season. I think it's like hunting. There is no off season for kids sports, but I've got something in mind. I think the one that I think you're hopefully kind of going to come out to, that would be probably the closest one for him to come to, and it would be a good one for him to be at. So we'll see if we can get him up to Madison for Vortex weekend.
Yeah, that would be really awesome. Shay's one of those individuals where, man, does he get, like you said, he burns the candle at every direction, every end. I mean, he just never seems to stop, which is I give him kudos. He's another individual that I look up to as far as a husband, a father, and just a hard worker. There's no short change there.
No, he's a good man doing things the right way, and the good Lord's rewarding him for it. So
absolutely. So Chris, talking about, I guess, Shay, some really cool things have been released. Well, actually, before we get into that, let's, obviously this will air post that your scheduled event post of scheduling of the HHA USA events. What, like you said, you have a bunch coming up. Any particular ones that you would like to talk about or share about?
Well, the one thing, and unfortunately this isn't open to everybody, but the one that I invited you to is one of our, I'm going to call you quote unquote partners and industry friends, but we've got a really good relationship with Vortex, and they have just an amazing facility outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And so this April we were down there for one day. We had invited 200 plus, but we had about 140 or 150 active duty veterans, law enforcement, first responders, just because every time I go to that place, I'm like, this is awesome. I need to bring more of my friends here. And it's like, why not have an HHA USA event here? So we are doing that for 2 days with Vortex in April. And then that's also going to piggyback onto our public event, which is in Oregon, Wisconsin, which is about a 20-minute drive from Vortex. But we're going to have a sporting clays event one day with our friends from the Neestead Foundation, who they do a lot of great work for the veteran community, getting them out on hunts. And then we're doing 3D archery there. We're returning to 3 clubs that we had taken off the schedule last year, just because my plan, or I should say this year, but my plan for 2023 was kind of to draw our Wisconsin events down with plans of going outside the state. But now once that changed, we added these 3 clubs back into the mix. So Rib Mountain Bowman, which is up in Wausau, Washera Archers. I'm actually getting ready to have lunch with those guys today, and then Blackhawk Archers of Stevens Point are 3 really, really good clubs, and all of those have members that are either volunteers or folks on their board that either did serve or currently are still serving. And just really, really cool. And I guess I'm kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent here, but one story that happened, and I don't think you'll mind me at least mentioning him by first name, but
please do.
Back in 2022, we had a shoot at Washera, and one of the gentlemen there is a firefighter and an EMT, and we were shooting. Trying to think who we were even shooting with. I was shooting with some other veterans. I think it was some of the guys from my mouth is going faster than my brain right now, and I can't remember the name of their organization. So I apologize, guys. But I had some vets up from Indiana, and I was shooting with them. And Brian was with us as well. He's the EMT. I was the only one in the group that was not a service member. And these 2 veterans were just talking about, their time in service and just kind of some of their struggles. It just was where the conversation went. And I was more just sitting back, observing, listening. And Brian was doing the same thing when we got to the second half of the course, and Brian just opened up. He's like, "Yeah, I didn't serve in the military, but I'm an EMT, and I've got some issues with post-traumatic stress." And it's like, wow, I did not expect that conversation to transpire on the archery range that morning. But I mean, that just shows you the power of these events and what happens when you bring people into that safe space where you bring like-minded people that have had similar experiences. Maybe it's in different branches of serving, but just providing those opportunities. And so, I mean, we're doing that 7 times in 2024 up in Wisconsin. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that I have to know all those stories. I don't care to know them all, but just knowing that they're happening, that's why I do it.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's awesome. And I'm excited, like I said, there's the whichever one that I'm hopefully going to be able to be blessed to come out to an experience. And my goal is to take it all in, you know what I mean? And just to lend a hand and take it all in and be a part of it will be just incredible. And I'm looking forward to that. So
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I'm super, since we've talked and kindled and everything along those lines with everything, Chris, it's just been an experience that I think hearing you say how much life-changing that experience really is. Like you said, there's something more about it that we just don't know about yet.
Yeah. And I need to do a better job. I mean, I live it every day. I mean, this is what I do, and I see the results of this stuff at our shoot, but I have to do a better job, through our website, through social media of just articulating, and it's impossible to do it without being there, but I want to do a better job of telling people, hey, this is what you're in for when you come to this. Mm-hmm. Because once people come, whether you're a service member or not, they're like, man, is it April yet? Is it time for HHA USA shoot season? Because it's different than anything else that's out there just because of the impact that it has.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited, like I said. So kind of to lead into like the last little bit, Chris, I mean, like I was saying earlier, some really cool, innovative things that came out this past year for HHA. I know, one individual was part of that, but, you had the Cerakoted bow sights and some more things are coming down the pipeline for you guys. How exciting is it right now to be in doing what you're doing? Because it just seems like, again, I know hunting, quote unquote, seems to be for certain people, they feel like we're under attack or whatever, however you feel. But I try to look into positive things. Like I see the sport of archery, whether it's bow hunting in general or just archery in general, I see it growing. Like I love recently, a goal of mine the last 5+ years has been to start some sort of an archery club at the school that I teach. And I teach it, right? And so I nerd out. I love doing that. But this past year, I've had multiple inquiries from individuals to really start a club. Now, the hard part is finding the space, but like just to hear the growing, like it's growing and people see, whether it's through social media, through whatever it be through a family member, it's I truly think the best is yet to come, and you're smack dab in the middle of it. You know, what are some cool things that maybe you're going to be coming out with? How exciting are you to see what the future holds?
Yeah, I mean, it's we talked about reflection at the beginning of the podcast, and I mean, our 2024 catalog is getting ready to go to the printer here this week, and I mean, it's our 40th year in business. My dad started this company in 1984. It's like that's the year that Born in the USA came out. Where the heck did the last 40 years go, right? And but we still feel like, even though we're 40 years in, people will think, ah, you guys are, I'm 48, my brother's 61. It's like, you guys are probably getting ready to retire sooner. And it's like, no way, man. We've got work left to do. And especially I feel like with my newfound faith, back in 2015, 2016, I don't approach HHA Sports the way that I used to. I don't approach my life the way that I used to. So, I mean, for the first 40 years of my life, I was living for myself. I wanted to, buy the new truck, build the new house, and make a bunch of money. And obviously, I still have to do things to provide for my family, but that's not my end game anymore.
Right.
I want to live a life that is honoring to God, and do that through my business. And I feel like He has blessed our business, over those last 6 or 7 years, and is going to continue to. And so I'm excited for what the next 10 years has to hold, because yeah, I mean, if you listen to some people, well, yeah, hunting is under attack and the numbers are down and not as many people are getting into it and kids are on their devices too much. Well, they're still making bows and arrows every day. They're still making bow sights every day. You're getting demand to put on an art program at your school. Eventually, things that are old are new again.
Yeah.
All the technology in the world is not going to give you that peace of mind that you get from getting out on an archery range and sending an arrow down into a target. You can't replicate that with technology.
No, you can't. I totally agree with that. And, there's one thing that I always appreciate when you and I talk, and we always say iron sharpens iron. And I just always love when you say that, and I always feel better, where my day will be heading that day. And I always give thanks to you and to the man upstairs. And along those lines, I want to know, Chris, a little rapid fire here. You talked about filling that doe tag the other night. You're hopefully going to be chasing Holly here this evening or in these upcoming days. And you said, you already mentioned some tacos. What is your venison go-to meal with the family?
I would have to say, I mean, it's weird. I never ate Mexican food as a kid. My junior high was literally right across the street from a Taco John's, which is kind of a legendary taco stand here in the Midwest. And I would never eat tacos when I was in high school. I would, after basketball practice, I would go grab a large Sprite and a large potato Lay's, which were basically just tater tots with Mexican seasoning on them, and that was my lunch. But I love tacos now, and I really got in the last probably this year, really got on a carne asada taco kick. I love carne asada street tacos. And so I'm like, man, I've got venison back straps in my freezer. Why don't I just start making my own? And I'm not tooting my own horn, because it's literally just a packet of Kinder seasoning from Walmart and throwing some back straps on the grill. But carne asada venison tacos are the bomb. I absolutely love them. And so my inside loins from my doe are going to be going on the grill tomorrow for some tacos. So that's my go-to.
Okay, so I know what I'll be making this week now. So
Yeah.
I'll be running down to the store to go grab some seasoning.
I would think probably about 12 o'clock Central, 12:30 Central on Wednesday, the 13th. You're going to see an Instagram post of my street tacos.
Nice. I'm excited for that. And then, what HHA sight are you running on your bow?
I'm currently shooting the Rise, which is the new one that we came out with back in July of 2022. And that, well, I'll try to keep a long story short there, but back in January of 2022, I missed Houdini. I shot right underneath him at 40 yards. And I mean, I was the guy that, I was a single pin shooter back before HHA was even making sights. I think it was an old, oh man, what was the name of it? It was out of Escanaba, Michigan. It was basically a lighted pin. This was pre-fiber optics. Hawkeye, I think it was called.
Okay.
But it was an illuminated pin on a aluminum bracket. I mean, you're talking 1988, 1989. But my dad had me shooting a single pin back before we were making optimizer sights. And so that was the question that I would always get, what happens if the deer moves? And I'm like, never happened. I've been using these things for 25 years. Never happened to me. Well, I ate a pretty large piece of humble pie in January of 22. I had the bow back on that deer at 25 yards, and he spooked and he took off to 40. And I held high and unfortunately shot right underneath him. And so had I had that rise sight, I would have had my second pin, which I think is 36 yards on my setup. I would have made a much better shot on that deer than I did. God had other plans. 8 months later, I killed him in the same spot. Didn't have to use my second pin on my rise because he was at 25 yards. But I just love that sight because it literally gets you from 0 to 40 without having to adjust it.
Yeah, that's behind me, as you can see. That's the two that I have on mine are the Tetra Rise, and same thing. It's made me more confident, and even killing my buck this year, Chris, you'll appreciate this. I always preach about practicing, and I can't gap shoot, or I try, or I shouldn't say I can't because I did it, but that's why I always elected to that single vertical one pin. And then with the Rise, I'm same as you. I'm 20, and I think I'm 36. Yes, 36 on the dot.
Yeah.
And this buck, when he came up, I ranged him, and he was 30, and I just said, okay, put that top pin, just aim a little bit higher, and perfect shot. And it was just money. And I was super excited. But again, I practice a lot. So like I always say, I practice what I preached on that one, where when in the summer, I'll go up in a tree, I'll throw targets at different yardage, whatever, and I try not to move my pin. So then that way, I'm practicing where I need to aim and what I could get away with, I guess you could kind of say. And that's what I did with that buck. But it was because, like I said, with the Rise, knowing that that double pin was right there, I was good, and I was successful.
And I mean, you talk about practice, and I mean that, after I missed Houdini in January of 2022, we came out with the Rise in July, but I mean, we had prototypes already in May. So I started shooting that sight, 4 months ahead of season last year. And I mean, we don't have tack style events out here in Wisconsin. So I mean, a long shot at a 3D for us might be a 50-yard shot. So it's a lot of 20 to 40-yard shots. And I loved those 30 to 45s. Yep. Because it really allowed me all season when I was going to my events to hone in and know my bow and, okay, what is my pin going to do at 32 yards? What's it going to do at 38, at 41? And I went into that season last year with more confidence, I think, than I ever had, just because I was so confident in my equipment.
Yeah, that's it. That's awesome. And then what is the bow of choice for Chris Hamm?
Right now, I mean, I'm a Matthews guy. They're right in our backyard, so I'm still running my Phase 4. I'll get a lift here once season is over, and I had a good friend in town that I would sell my old bows to every year. And since I've started HHA USA, I think my last 3 bows have gone at a pretty heavily discounted rate to some veterans and first responders. So I've actually got a veteran outside the Twin Cities lined up to take my Phase 4 off my hands, and then I'll be going to get a lift in January. So
that's awesome. I love to hear that. Well, Chris, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate everything that you've done for me, like I said, on that personal level. And I appreciate you sharing just what you shared today. I think it was a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to more to come, and of how I could, experience what you're doing out in Wisconsin this April. And like I said, I am just so excited to be a part of that. And I'm really, really excited for that. So where can people check that out? And as far as HHA Sports goes as well?
Yeah, so HHAUSA.org, that's our website for the nonprofit. You can go on there. You can, if you feel so led, you can make monetary donations there if you can't come out to one of our events. We've got our film series on there. The links to the podcast is on there as well, that drops every Friday. And I mean, you can find that on iTunes and Spotify and everywhere else as well. And then HHAsports.com is where you can go to check out all things HHA. And then we do sell merch for HHA Sports and HHA USA on the HHA Sports website. So the sweatshirt that I'm wearing here, I don't even know. I haven't been on the website for a few weeks. It should be up by now, but this is a brand spanking new shirt. We've got a hoodie. We've got a new T-shirt. We've got a new hat. I've got to get some new challenge coins rolling as well. So, but no, and I'm super excited to have you out. I hope you can make it to the Vortex event, just because I feel like with your platform, I think that's an area that you're really gonna see some fruit in, because you're going to get introduced to a lot of people that hopefully will come on your podcast, and they can speak more even than I can about the impact of the events that we're doing, because they're going to be the ones that have been getting the healing from that trauma. So
yeah, that's awesome, Chris. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everything. Hopefully everybody, you're rock and rolling this new year already, and you're living your best life. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week, and Antler Up.